Thank you for putting us in the middle of Silicon Valley. And it's a pleasure to be back here. This is our one of our trips to Vrindavan we do every year, and we just got in this morning from California via Singapore. And it's a very nourishing place to stop. We can't think of entering the Dham without coming here first. So thank you very much for having us. Hare Krishna. I told Mataji my favorite chair in the world is right over there. It's where she feeds me. I took a picture with it today. I first would like to offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, whose very deliberate campaign to disseminate the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita had reached me out in California when I was a teenager. And I found it to be not just a revelation, but also very practical. And along with the knowledge that he distributed, I got a Back to Godhead magazine. That was one of the ways that the knowledge was distributed back then. He also had started a movement where there were ashrams in various places around the world. I just happened to be near San Francisco, so I was able to join that ashrama. And not only read about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, but also take it up in a very practical way. So in that way, my spiritual master saved my life. I don't know what I would have done without him. I had looked for spiritual knowledge and found only fragmental information that wasn't practicable. And therefore, my eternal debt of gratitude to him is my preoccupation in life, looking ways to assist him in carrying on that deliberate distribution of Bhagavad Gita and the other literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's a pleasure to be here because this is the most important kind of gathering that one can have. We have obligatory gatherings, like you have to go to school or you have to go to work and be with certain kinds of people. And those are important because you have to live your life. It's very practical. But to come together in a group to discuss the purpose of life and how to attain it is the most important gathering of all. And we find that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the quintessential book and elaborate and detailed teachings about how to perfect one's human life, it's a gathering. The opening scene in the Bhagavatam is at Naimisharanya forest, which is not so far from here, where high-minded people got together to discuss the purpose of life and how to make it available to everybody else, the practice that would help people to achieve the ultimate goal of life. And there are stories within stories in the Bhagavatam, and they are mostly dialogue, conversation, and group meetings, sometimes one-on-one. So this is like that. This is the tradition of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavad Gita, of course, is a dialogue as well. Two dialogues going on at the same time. There's Sanjaya speaking to Dhritarashtra, and then he's recounting the dialogue that's taking place between Krishna and Arjuna. So today, I hope for the same kind of dialogue we can discuss. And lately, I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita. My wife and I take out time every day to sit together and hear from the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we just read the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes what is knowledge. And he says that knowledge means to understand that you're not your body. In fact, he puts it in a very interesting way. He says that when you see that you're the knower of the field, so he refers to your body as a field, ostensibly a field of activities. A field is oftentimes a defined area. And then there's the body, which is a defined area for us. And we're not the field, but we're what he calls kshetra gya. Or kshetra means field, and gya means the knower. So one who knows the field. And that's an interesting perspective, isn't it? Because oftentimes, without analyzing what's really going on in my life or who I am, I might just go on with my life situation. And in that case, I might experience the world as if I am the field. Whenever something happens to me, mentally, physically, then I just think, oh, this is happening to me. But a slight shift in perspective, then I see that, well, the field is something I'm interacting with. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the points I made in this book I just wrote. Just means, I think I finished it a while ago, last year. And one of the points is something that Krishna talks about in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is that we can notice our body as part of the material world. He describes how there's two energies at work in the world. One is us, who are conscious beings, and the other is everything else. And what I've been noticing lately is that, as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, our physical bodies are a microcosm of the entire cosmos. It's the same ingredients as makes up the whole universe. There are ingredients Krishna mentions earlier in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 7th chapter, he catalogs them as earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. And then he says, besides these, there's a different energy, which is a higher energy. It is far superior, and it's the consciousness within the body. He also, just for context, says that consciousness within the body has two features. One is the Atma, and the other is the Paramatma. And in describing or giving more context to that, Srila Prabhupada in his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita quotes from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, where he says that Upanishad compares our body to a tree, and then there's two birds in the tree. One bird is the soul, or the Atma, and the other is the Paramatma. So there's two conscious beings within the body. And the ingredients of the body are reabsorbed into the world after we leave it. That's something else Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita. There's a book called Sri Ishopanishad. If you haven't gotten a copy of that, I recommend it. Out of the 108 Upanishads that are primary, this is considered to be the most important. And in it, there's a verse that says, Vayura nilam amritam atedam bhashmantam shariram om krato smara kritam smara krato smara kritam smara. Let this temporary body be burnt to ashes, and let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. It's a prayer. He said, now, my Lord, please remember all my sacrifices now that I'm leaving this temporary body. please remember all that I've done for you. And there's a way in which the ingredients of this body go back into the reservoir of all ingredients that are the universe. But when they come together in a particular configuration, they become the kshetra that we're now inhabiting. So what's in it for us? Well, there's a way in which our body is completely responsive. If you've ever measured your biodata, this is something nowadays people do. I do it sometimes, but not as diligently as I could. But if you've ever taken time to weigh yourself, have you ever weighed your body? Anybody? A couple of people have tried it. You may notice that there are certain habits, especially eating, exercising, things like that, where you can kind of predict whether the weight's going to go up or down. Is that a thing here in India? That's interesting, that it's predictable. There's a lot of other predictions you can make about the body because the body is responsive. It's very responsive, not just physically, but also mentally. Whatever we do with our body, then we can measure that it has there's a response. And so, if you extend the idea I mentioned before, that this body is a microcosm of the universe, one of the points that is made in the Bhagavad Gita is that the whole world is responsive. That is, our body's responsive, so there's ways in which when you don't get enough sleep, how are you going to feel? Just use one word. How are you going to feel if you don't sleep? Tired, thank you. That's why we work together. You feel tired. If you don't eat for a while, you're going to feel, it's an H word, yeah. What are some other ways in which we know the responses of our body? Thirsty, yeah. If you don't drink water, you just naturally get thirsty. It responds to you, right? Sleepy, yeah. If you're tired, thirsty, hunger. Sleepy.
If you hear something nasty,
if you hear something
nasty,
yeah. For instance, somebody says something nasty about you on the internet, you may twist and turn at night. It's like, why'd they say that about me? I told them not to say anything. Something like that. You can notice that there's a reaction that we get according to our interaction with the body. It responds in predictable ways. It's highly predictable. You may think, oh, it's just by accident that I've gained weight. No, it's not. There's a formula, actually. If you eat more calories than you burn off, then the body stores it. And it's really, the body is intelligent. It's got an AI system built into it, so that everything is measurable and predictable about the body. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's described. Krishna describes in the 13th chapter how the universe is like that too. It is not random. There's a way in which everything has an algorithm, everything is intelligent, and everything responds to us. So in this book, the 4 questions, there's it starts with the very simple directive that comes from a book called the Brahma Sutras, or also called the Vedanta Sutra. So what that is a summary of all the wisdom of the Vedas. It's written in codes. Many of you are in IT. Any of you are in IT? I don't want to make any assumptions. Is anybody here in IT? Do you work with codes sometimes? Say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. C++ or is that old? It's a little old, sorry. What's in? Everyone's on AI now, so don't even say what? JavaScript, yeah. JavaScript is a code, various codes. So there's a way in which all the wisdom of the Vedas is put into code. It's codified in the Vedanta Sutra, and these codes are meant to preserve the knowledge so that it can be utilized by people everywhere. That was the mission of Vyasadeva, who was the compiler and the codifier of the Vedas. He actually took the time to codify all the most important wisdom and put it in the Vedanta Sutra. And the first of the codes is very practical. It's Atato Brahma Jignasa. And that means that, and of course there's a lot packed into the code. They're also called sutra, which means that it's condensed and that there's a lot of meaning in a few words. So in this first sutra or code, he says, now that you're a human, raise your hand if you're a human. Checking. AI robots got in here. It's your time to inquire. There are a couple of implications for that. One is that according to the Vedas, there are 8,400,000 species of life. You can't count them. Even oceanographers admit that they only know 7%. That's their guess of what's in the ocean. And out of all those, says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Manushanam Sahasreshu, it's very rare to get a human form. And the human form has a special intelligence so that we can understand causality. And when one comes to the human form, that's what atato means, therefore. And the implication of therefore is, therefore, now that you're in this portal, this biomechanical device, the human body, inquire. But what kind of inquiry should you make? Because everyone's making inquiries about various topics which have to do with our maintenance. For instance, how much does a pound of rice cost? That's a question that a lot of people might ask. Or where can I buy some cloth? Or where can I find work? How am I going to get over to Radhesham Prabhu's house tonight? Well, that's a pretty transcendental question. So there's lots of questions. And Srila Prabhupada points out in one of his commentaries that even animals ask questions. You can hear them talking. Crows talk to each other. They have language. They have different ways they speak. And their questions are confined to questions about survival. We have to survive in the world, and therefore I ask questions: how to survive? How can I get some rice? And the aphorism Atato Brahma Jignasa means, therefore, now that you're a human being, ask a bigger question. And Atato Brahma means ask about Brahman. What is Brahman? Brahman means the source of everything. Ask about your source. And the idea is, if you ask, the answer will be forthcoming. This is very important because people want to know what is a spiritual process that's non-sectarian. We get caught up oftentimes in rituals, an idea like, oh, my parents taught me this, and what does it mean? Like, I have no idea what it means. I just do it because everybody else does it. And that goes on everywhere. And those who are very sincere want to know what is the process through which anyone from any culture can have a direct experience of God and understand the purpose of life. And this is what the Vedanta Sutra starts with. It said, you're already equipped to understand it. But the tool, which Prabhu brought up in his introduction, is the question. So it said, Jignasa means now inquire about Brahman. So the idea here is that if you ask the question, then you avail yourself to the answer. Or, as I'll say a little bit more about how I started by opening the Bhagavad Gita to the 13th chapter, Krishna says, ask the question and also prepare yourself for the answers. Because getting answers to questions scientifically, there may be a way of looking at the universe from the point of view of demanding the answers. We have what we call the essence of the scientific approach, which is the controlled experiment. And you may notice in the phrase itself is the word control. And we can only control nature to a certain degree. We can see now that, for instance, with climate change, things are seemingly uncontrollable. And although we have scientific means for discovering how to treat diseases, it's not that they always cooperate. Around the 50s and beginning of the 60s, there was an idea that we had the means to eradicate all major diseases. And then they mutate and come back again. So material nature itself isn't altogether controllable. However, it is measurable to a certain degree. But as I mentioned before, there are two different energies. There's the material energy and the superior energy, which is consciousness. And that's not discoverable or measurable in the same way as when we do a controlled experiment with material nature. Therefore, Krishna gives this very helpful advice in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that ask the question and prepare yourself for the answer. And it depends on your attitude and how much you can accept the answer. And he gives this remarkable list of what he called the elements of knowledge, or the ways that you can adjust your own attitude to accept knowledge. And the first two are humility and pridelessness. That seems to be the opposite of other ways of trying to get knowledge, which is to develop oneself in a certain category of knowledge and then use a controlled method to study it and then discern the answer using your own intelligence. There's a difference. Humility, pridelessness is an admission that I don't know much of anything. In fact, I just met with a professor from Brown University because I wrote this book, and part of the reason I wrote the book as one of my stated purposes in writing it was to enter into conversations with various thinkers around the world. And I realized a while back that one of the ways to do that is to have a calling card, which is a book. When you're an author, you can call it, or you can have somebody call for you and say, oh, there's an author just published a book and people are reading it and he'd like to talk to you. He read some of your stuff and would you like to have a conversation? So I've had the fortune of meeting some people, like the CFO of LinkedIn I met recently, and we had a conversation. It was recorded. It was at Stanford University, and he interviewed me, and then we had a conversation back and forth. So then I met this professor from Brown University who wrote a book called The Knowledge Illusion. And he's a cognitive psychologist, and he talks about how we know a lot less than we think we do. And he points out in his very interesting book about the ways in which we think we know a lot. You can all move up 7.2 inches, or if you need the metrics, I'll have to ask Siri what that is. Siri, what's 7.2? She's not here. Okay. And so there's a sense, a very real sense, even from an empiric point of view, if you're honest as a scientific person, that it's very hard to know really what's going on. He said we assume that we know a lot, but then he'll point out that if you have to articulate about any particular in your life and tell how it works, you'd be hard-pressed to do it. He uses the example of a commode. He says everyone thinks they know how a commode works, but describe it. How does it actually work? And well, frankly, I really don't know. It would take some thought, but multiply that times everything in our lives. We take a lot for granted that things just work, and we just work them. After I discussed with him and read his book, I was standing at somebody's car loading some things in, and I was thinking, I couldn't make one of these. I have no idea how to do it. And if you extend that out into our lives and the world around us, we really don't know what's going on. It's very hard to tell. So Krishna says, you can understand to some degree, or to the degree in which you'll feel satisfied if you take a different approach. So the first question in the book, of this book I wrote called The Four Questions, is, what is my purpose? And purpose, having a purpose indicates, if you trace the word back, it comes from propose, and it means to have a specific reason for doing something. And it also, in the context of what I'm talking about, indicates that we have some responsibility. So that responsibility in the human life is to come to understand that we have a higher purpose. That's indicated in a Tato Brahma Jignasa. Don't ask ordinary questions, it implies, but ask the biggest question possible. So that's sort of a preamble to what I wanted to, a few other points I'm going to talk about. I won't be long-winded, and I'll ask you for any reflections or questions. But one concept I'll speak about now could be very useful. And it is this, that just as our body is responsive to us, so is everything in the universe. And beyond that, so is Krishna, or God. He's responsive. This is a very important point because, as Sri Upanishad says, Tadejati tanaijati, tadure tadvantike, tarantarasya sarvasya, taru sarvasya sivayata. God's far away, but He's very near as well. He's within everything, and yet He's outside of everything. These kind of descriptions of Krishna are given in various scriptures. He can be very far away or can be very near as well. And when we have a sense that everything about this world is responsive, and that's because it's all part of Krishna. And Krishna is described in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam as Abhigna and Swarat. Abhigna means he's not a stone. Stones aren't responsive. But conscious beings are, isn't it? Say yes. Say yes more enthusiastically.
Yes.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I don't know about in America or in India, but in America, if you're driving and you look at somebody in the car next to you, do you have that here? For some reason, you're not supposed to look at people. If you look at people when you're driving, they'll take offense. Like, why are you looking at me? Here it
means it's a race now.
It's a race.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a kind of response. But there's cognition. I look at you, you look at me, or there's a way, because we're superior energy, consciousness, we have cognition. And when we look at another living being, we'll notice that there's a responsiveness. Well, the Srimad Bhagavatam says, Krishna is supremely responsive. This is the indication. He's supremely responsive. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions in many places that he's responsive. First of all, he said, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridaya sharaduna tishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudrani maya. He puts us on notice. I'm with you, you know. Don't forget, I'm with you all the time. This is really the essence of Krishna consciousness. Remember, God's right there with you. But there's more than that. He's responsive. It's not just that he's there and he doesn't care. There are philosophies about the Supreme and God, that he created the universe, but he's at arm's length. In the Gita, which is a very personal admission by God, by Krishna himself, that no, not only am I there with you, but I'm also responsive to you. For instance, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Tesham ivanakam partam ahama jnana jantamaha nashyam yam abhavasto jnana dipena basvata. So two famous verses from the Bhagavad Gita. If you think about it, this is all you need. That Krishna, he's there with us. Okay, throw in three. The one I first mentioned, he's there. He says, yantra means the machine of the body. And we have already established that we're there within the machine of the body. He says, I'm also there with you. And then in these other two verses, he said, I'm responsive. Tesham satata yutana. So to those who notice me, who give me their attention, I respond. I respond. And especially if there's a sense of respect or gratitude or love that someone gives to God. This means what? What's this mudra? Try it. Try this mudra. It's the most important mudra. There's a lot of mudras, right? Say yes. You have to work for me. I'm from California. I need a little help. Try this mudra. What does it mean?
Namaskar.
Yeah, but what does it mean?
Respect.
Feel. Kind of respect, yeah. And there's a way in which this is the essence. And if we think of the essence of what is bhakti, it starts something like this. It can mean, or I show you respect. So respect means to see someone, specter, spectacles. It all comes from that Latin word, or maybe it's Greek. You have to look it up. That I'm seeing something, I'm noticing something, I'm looking there. So the essence of Krishna's teaching in the Bhagavad Gita is, I am there with you, always, and if you see me, and you give me your attention, or here he says, Priti, if you give me love, if you show love towards me, it's very high thought. He said, then I'll respond also. As if he's waiting there, always ready to respond. So, and in the next verse I quoted, he says poetically that if you want to know me more, you want to enter into this relationship with me, then I'll help you. And how will I help you? I'll light a lamp. Isn't that nice? Jnana dipena bhashvata. He says, I'll light the lamp that will take away any darkness in your life. I'm there for you. So, one of the main points I wanted to impart today, because it's so meaningful to me, and it's such an essential or foundational aspect of practicing, having a spiritual practice, is that God is responsive. What is the main point I'm trying to make tonight? It's 3 words. Can you repeat it back? Yeah, if you think about that, how God is responsive, then there's a way you do everything a little differently. First of all, let's start where I started. If you realize that your body is responding to what you do for it, then you'll be a little more careful. I guarantee you, if you start weighing yourself, for instance, it makes you more aware of the fact that, oh yeah, okay, I ate a lot last week, and I didn't walk or anything like that, so I gained a pound. And therefore you have the sense, okay, I know I have a relationship with the body. And if you start noticing those things, the relationship, the universe, there's this concept of karma that everybody knows about, and they say, is it really, how does it work? Well, Krishna says in the Gita, yeah, it's there, it's complicated, but it's all part of this responsive AI system of the universe. It exactly corresponds to what you're doing. It's purposeful. It's not punitive. It's very purposeful, and I'll get into that in a second. And then when it comes to God, He's personal. It's not AI. There's somebody there. And that's what we all want. We want somebody to be home for us. We want to be able to know that somebody, another conscious entity, really cares. And that's why people always, the perennial conversation about AI is that, yeah, but does it really care? I know it can do stuff, but does it know me? Does it really love me? And so forth. We even want it to become diabolical just so we'll know it's there and alive. Like, can they organize against us, the human race, and so forth? We're looking for personality. And Krishna says, yeah, that's what we all want, so I'm there, and I'm responsive. Body's responsive, universe is responsive, Krishna is directly responsive. And that's what bhakti is. It's to understand how Krishna is directly responsive. And then life becomes a exhilarating experience, because there are different ways in which I can test that. Just as if you start measuring how your body's doing, then you get more organized about it. It's like, okay, I understand that if I walk every day, then I'll feel better. And then you get into it. It's like, I'll make that part of it. So in bhakti practice, I know God's responsive, so how can I be more in contact? How can I really express myself? And what we want to do is we want to hear Him speaking to us also. And so there are ways in which to prepare oneself, as I mentioned. For instance, there are standards of living and utilizing one's body that make one more open to hearing Krishna. I don't bring up the 4 regulative principles, but let's just take some of the regulative principles. There are these principles my spiritual master taught me when he first came and said, okay, here's 4 things, just stay away from, because it's going to impede your ability to connect. As intoxication is an example. If you have an accountant and it's time for your quarterly report, and you call your accountant because he's a day late, you say, do you have the report? And you say, oh, I've been really drunk lately, so I didn't get it together. What will you do? You change the account. I was so high, I couldn't even look at the numbers. I mean, I couldn't see it. You fire that person. We don't want to, when something's so important, we don't want to have anything obscure that duty. So there's that, and the other regulative principles follow in similar ways. I won't go into details, but they distract us so much. So the idea of spiritual life is try to, just as if you're trying to take care of your body, you start organizing yourself. Let's not eat so much of that. Let's do this and exercise and so forth, because I know there's a response. So the practice of bhakti yoga is this recognition that there's this responsiveness, and I want more of it. This is called love. There's this exchange. I'm going to do more to prepare myself so that Krishna, who wants to reciprocate with me, it's like, I didn't call in drunk. Like, I've tried to God's like, I'm trying to contact you. It's like, yeah, but I'm really high. I can't hear what you're saying. That doesn't indicate very much respect. It doesn't show love and so forth. So, using the question and then preparing oneself to take the answer. Those are the two practices. And the underlying principle is that God is responsive. And it's not like he forgets or takes a time off. This is another point. He's always there. And he's always eager to respond. And that's inspiring. It's inspiring to me to know that no matter what I've ever done, he's neutral to that. He's like, okay, you try it out. And when you're ready, you come to me. And it's not like he's affected by material qualities where he feels like, well, you didn't talk to me, so I'm not going to talk to you. When you're ready, then he'll appropriately respond, or respond in kind, or even respond more than we can expect. That's one of the names of Krishna. Vanchatita means he responds more than we can expect. So that's an exciting lifestyle. That's a spiritual lifestyle. Whatever culture it comes from, these are the essential aspects to a real spiritual practice. And so, using the question, which is Atato Brahma Jignasa, there are 4 questions in the book. The first is, what is my purpose? And one exercise that I've found very useful in getting closer to answering that question is to take time to write down all your priorities. If you've ever seen animals and watched their habit, they generally are on a particular program. For instance, beavers. I've heard about beavers, but I got to see some in Utah when we went to stay with some devotees there. And we went hiking and we saw that they built these really beautiful dams. And then I saw on YouTube that somebody had brought a beaver home as a pet. Do you know what a beaver is? You don't have beavers in India, do you? You should all come to America so you can see a beaver. They have these big flat tails, and they have they're big teeth. Yeah, that's one of their main characteristics. They can chew a whole tree down with their teeth, and then they gather logs. They build these dams, and they have a whole ecosystem. If you get a beaver as a pet, and I'm not recommending it, they'll take your furniture, they'll chew the legs off of this in the middle of the night, and they'll start trying to build a dam somewhere in your house. They can't do otherwise. They have a little chip that says build dam, survive. That's how they live. Humans are not like that. They can come to this cognition that I can reach for something higher. That's why humans do some things that are not economically reasonable. For instance, flying into space. Like, where is it? They dig holes or go to the bottom of the ocean and say, where do I come from? Let's look at the dust. Let's look at the mud. Let's look everywhere and try to find out where we come from. Well, that's what the Vedanta Sutra says. Try to figure that out. Now's the time you can do that. So, as an individual, you can do it yourself. That's the point. You don't have to wait for anybody else. You're fully equipped. And you're not only that, you're being advised by the highest authorities. The axiomatic authority of the Vedas is saying, ask the question. So one of the ways to ask that is, what is my purpose? And one of the ways to make that practical is to take some time by yourself. I recommend doing it on paper. if you have, do you have legal size paper? Yeah, get a legal pad and a pen, and just take some time. Schedule it ahead of time. Don't do it on the fly, but take some time by yourself. Put a do not disturb sign on your door. Take at least an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and it takes a little while to wind down because your mind's going to be saying, yeah, but I got to go. It's like, not right now. We're going to sharpen our sense of purpose. And then start writing down, what are my priorities in life? Are you thinking about it right now when I mention it? What would you write down? You don't have to say anything, but just think in your mind, what would your top 3 priorities be for your life? And then you'll notice, oh no, but there's more I want to do. And you'll come up with 7, and then 10, and then 15, and then you're going to have to reorder them. And you'll say, okay, what should be my top priority? This is the question that Parikshit Maharaj asked. Remember Parikshit Maharaj? He was emperor of the world, everything going seemingly okay, and then there was a sudden occurrence where everything just came to a complete reversal in his life, where you got cursed. What kind of curse? You're going to die. When? 7 days. That's like when you get your pen out. So what am I going to do in the next 7 days? And really what he's asking is, what's my purpose in the next 7 days? And what should I be doing? We don't know if we have 7 days or not. We could have 7 or 70 or who knows. It's not sure. So take time and write down, what are my top priorities? It's a very edifying process. Once you start ordering them, you move one priority above the next and think about it. What's most important to me in life? Or the question is, what's my purpose? Then you'll naturally start moving towards it when you know. The problem is, I don't often know what my purpose is, so I'm just going along. That's called, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Doesn't matter which way you're going if you don't know exactly where you're trying to go, right? So, yes. Yeah. Okay, I'll say a couple more things, and then we'll take some reflections. Second question is, how may I be of service? Would you like to try saying that question?
How may I be of service?
This is an aligning question, because existentially, what we are as conscious beings, we're part of Krishna. He's our source. And we are naturally aligned in service. Service satisfies us. In fact, at the big assembly at Naimasaranya, where all the sages got together and said, what's the purpose of life? They said, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktira hoksaje ahaitu kia pratiyata yayapa supersedes. Everyone can be happy if you learn how to serve God. That's it. Very simple answer. You want to be happy? If you want all human beings, how can all human beings be happy? How can all living beings be treated properly? If you realize that you are a servant of God and you're engaged in that service practically and without stoppage, you'll always feel happy. Now, have you ever gone to a gathering where you felt awkward because you didn't know how you fit in, or if you were dressed properly? That's one. You're not sure. Somebody invited you, you went to a gathering, you weren't sure exactly what the dress code was, and you get, am I overdressed, underdressed? Does this resonate?
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like that? And then you get there and you don't know anybody, maybe? Like your friend said she was coming and then she didn't show up, so you're there alone. You're not sure if you're dressed right. And then you don't know who's, like, how do I fit in? I'm just giving you a very practical scenario. So then, let's just say you see somebody hovering around the kitchen. and you go over and you say, how may I be of service? And then they say, okay, you could help me move these trays out there onto the table and set up the cups. So suddenly, how do you feel now? Less awkward, right? In fact, you suddenly feel like an insider, right? And if somebody else walks in the door, they see you moving the trays and the cups, they'll think, oh, that person's part of the program, they work here. Well, the program in the world of the universe is to be in service. And if you want to be an insider in the universe and not feel awkward all the time, then ask the question, how may I be of service? Once you're serving God, you're an insider. And everything works and you don't feel awkward. That's what Savai Pum Samparo Dharmo. The highest way to be happy is to align yourself in service to God. That's it. That's the whole answer. And so if you want to know how to get out of the awkwardness of life, says the Bhagavatam, ask this question, how may I be of service? And the next question is a very deep question. It's, what is the lesson? You want to try that one?
What is the lesson?
Yeah. One of the most commonly asked questions is, why me? Why did this happen to me? And the tone of that is not the same as, what's the lesson? It's, I'm the victim. Why why did this happen to me? Let's go back to the body and our relationship with it being responsive. It's like, now I'm overweight, so why me? It's like, well, how can I put this gently? I've seen you overeating lately and not going on your walks, or whatever it is. So there's a way that there's a kind of sense of whatever's happening to me, there's a reason for it, and there's a very good reason. It's meant to bring out my highest potential. That's what this world's for. This world, you can give many metaphors for the world and for your life, but pick the right one. In fact, I just read a book about the power of metaphor, because so many times if you give the wrong metaphor, you're going in a direction which may not be helpful. For instance, the world is a race. Have you ever heard that one? But you didn't hear it like that, right? It was a rat race. That's an odd kind of metaphor to give to life. Life is a race, and then you're always running everywhere you go, trying to get ahead of who? Who are you trying to get ahead of, right? And so there's a metaphor that goes with this question, which is, what's the lesson? And that the whole world is a schoolhouse. There are classrooms in it. And it's meant to bring us to the highest, most refined version of ourselves that we can come to. So there's a way in which Brahma says this in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You all know what I'm thinking, right? Taptenu kampam susumikshamano vujana evatmakritam vipakam. Here he's saying, in one of the most famous verses about how to be spiritual, he says, see whatever happens to you as a lesson, something to learn from this. And so if you're able to ask, what's the lesson? Whatever happens to you, Brahma says, then you're tuned into the purpose of the universe. And it's very practical. What can I take from this? And you'll notice it's hard to ask, because the default mode is, why me? I don't deserve this, is the idea, right? But if you understand the context of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a one-to-one relationship with whatever we do or have done. Life's a continuum, or not just this life, there's many lives. I'm responsible. And therefore, what's the lesson to learn to come into complete alignment? And the last question is, are you ready for the last question? There's only 4. This is it. The last question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Where am I investing my attention right now? Want to say it?
Where am I investing my attention right now?
Yeah. So, anybody here have any money? What a rude question. Of course, we all have some money. And then, regarding financial matters, what do the letters ROI stand for? That's important if you have money, right? That's one of the first things. Like, it makes a difference. One of the wonders of the world is compounding interest, and the law of 72 and all that. So, if you look at money, and you say, like, how am I going to get the most out of this? That's what investment is. I want the money to work for me. So, where's the best investment? But here's a higher concept, a more important concept. ROA. What does that stand for? For somebody who's not read the book yet. You read the book. Return on attention. I'll make an outlandish proposition to you right now. Your most important asset is your attention. Because everything else you have is perishable. But what you are, in fact, the verb to be, conjugated as is, are, was, has been, and so forth, right? Say yes. Yes. And in Hindi it's ha. What are the conjugations of the verb? That's is, right? He. So what are some of the conjugations of that? He, ha, oga. So this verb, which is universal, is the meaning of it is that which remains. That's what is. The definition, if you trace it back, of is means that which remains. And in the Gita, Krishna says, Nasato vidite bhavo, na bhavo vidite sata, ubayor api dushton tas tvanayos tattvadarshibhi. There's a difference between reality and illusion. And you should know the difference. That's real education. What's illusory is changing, and what remains, that's reality. So, what we are is conscious being. What we have is going away. In fact, everything we have. Name 3 things we have? A body, money, and a house. All of those 3 things. Well, name any of those 3 things that don't have a shelf life. You know what a shelf life means? I think it came from marketing, because you put cereal on the shelf. How long can we sell this stuff for? Because it's not going to last forever. And I think in physics they call it a half-life. There are certain elements that break down at a certain level, and they call it the rate at which they break down a half-life. So which of these things, your body, your money, and your house, don't have a shelf life? Somebody be more demonstrative about answering the question. Who wants to answer?
They all have a shelf life.
They all have a shelf life. Thank you. So, what doesn't have a shelf life is you. You're going to go on even when your house isn't there. You're going to go on even when your money isn't there. And you're going to go on, wait for it, even when your body isn't there. All those 3 things have a shelf life. What you have as a conscious entity is really nothing. Nothing material, nothing in the physical world is ours to keep. It all has a shelf life. But what we do have is a free will, and the essence of free will, to put it simply, is where we invest our attention in any given moment. And I'll give you a mantra that goes with it that makes it helpful and useful. And that is, where attention goes, energy flows. So there's a way in which, wherever we're placing our attention in any given minute, that's where we're either helping ourselves or we're losing ourselves in this world. And therefore, it's said in the Sri Upanishad, which I've quoted, this is the third time I've quoted it today, Anyadevahur sambhavat, anyadahura sambhavat, iti shushumadiranam yenas tadvichakshara. That is, there's a completely different result that you get from looking at the physical world and thinking that's for me, and looking at Krishna and saying, he's for me. Totally different result. Which result do you want? That's your investment. So, from moment to moment in your life, the way to come out of feeling helpless, tell me if any of these match any time, if you've ever felt any of these. Have you ever felt helpless?
Yes.
Have you ever felt overwhelmed?
Yes.
Have you ever felt confused? Then you know how I feel all the time. So there's a way in which you can immediately come out of that helplessness, that feeling of being overwhelmed and so forth. And that is to bring your attention in the present moment to Krishna. And that's why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manmana Bhavanad Bhakto. And he gives myriad ways in the Bhagavad Gita to remember him and connect. If you see the sunshine, he says, that's me. If you smell the earth, like when that first rain comes in, oh, that's nice. Or the smell of a flower, that's the scent of the earth and so forth. That's me. So the third question means ask yourself from moment to moment when you feel bewildered, overwhelmed, confused, what is the best investment of my attention right now? And if you bring your attention to Krishna, best way, according to Prabhupada, he's commenting on the verse, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmaradhyudyacha. This is Krishna speaking. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. This is the last thing I'll say, and if there's time we can have a few questions. Okay. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, get your life together. I was going to say California, get your scene together. But he says, get your life together. How do you do that? He says, practice remembering me because it's consequential. Don't wait till the last minute. Like you're getting ready for a big test. Don't be a slacker and wait till the last minute. He says, practice throughout your lifetime. Because young vapi smaran bhavam, etc., whatever way you've developed your tendency to grab onto things in the world, that's going to carry you somewhere. It's consequential. You don't want to, for instance, just a mother telling you, you're not paying attention, you're not studying properly, you're going to end up working in what do they say in India when you're going to end up in a note? In a hubba? I'm a dabba. Dilip, you start studying, you're going to end up in a dabba. Yeah, in America they say car wash or shoveling out somebody's driveway somewhere. So the Shastra is saying, like, don't throw your life away. Don't measure in minor things. Measure in the most important thing. That's Krishna. And get ready, because Krishna's talking from this really high existential point of view. When you leave this body, and it is going to happen, that whatever you've invested in, whatever you invested your attention in for this lifetime, you're going to go there. So he says, get it together. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudyacha. It's very practical. As he's speaking to Arjuna, he's saying, therefore, think of me and then fight. Doesn't say fight and then think of me. He says, think of me and then fight. And he says, because of that contribution to your thinking of me, that you can get yourself ready for leaving the world. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, if you want to know the practical way of doing that, then learn how to attentively call out God's names. This is the practice for the age. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Highest ROA you can get, Lord Chaitanya said. You want the best ROA? And it's like, yeah. Or you want best ROI? Where? Where do I invest? Best ROA. Give your attention to repeating God's name, and it's simple. You'll be able to give yourself and develop your relationship with Krishna, and you'll be ready. So those are a few thoughts. There's more in the book. It's not my book. It's a book I put a lot of these thoughts into, and it was published by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. So I don't own the copyright. I signed it over to the BBT because Prabhupada told his disciples to write, and he said you should write through the BBT. So I was fortunately able to do that, and it is what it is. So now let's see if there are any reflections or questions. Do we have a few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Till 9 o'clock. Okay, we'll be here all night. Now, reflections are helpful because if you heard anything that resonated and you repeat it back and we discuss it, it can help solidify the concept. Questions, as I point out in this book, questions are like a hook. So if you ask a question, make it relevant to the subject so that, well, anyway, you can ask whatever you want. It's a free room. So reflect. Yes, Prabhu, please.
I come to your third question where you said, why me? Why me?
Actually, the question was, what's the lesson? I was saying, why me is the default, which means, why am I the victim?
If I am
Sounds
coming on
like-
that,
yeah.
what happens if we get something?
Keep that right there.
If we get something in the life good, we get gain, we may or may not express our gratitude to the God.
That's a good point.
We may or may not express our gratitude to the God.
Yeah.
But when something goes wrong in the life, we will hold him responsible for that.
Right, yeah.
And at times when you try to convince that person that God is not responsible for all wrongs happen to you, it is because of your past karma and so on.
It's not on, that's why it can't. Yeah.
So it is not. So at times you will say God is not responsible for your wrong happens to you.
Right.
It is because of your past karma and so on. Then he will go step ahead. He will say, no, I am very honest, I am very sincere, I have not done anything wrong with others, I am devotee and so on. So why wrong thing has happened to me? So how to convince that person that God is not responsible for your wrong thing happening in life?
Well, the person you've described sounds a little intractable to me. And it's not so easy when people... Generally, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Vita raga bhaya krodha mammaya mamupashrita bhavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavamagata. He says there are ways in which we get in this psychological conundrum here in the world. And there's three psychological blockades we have to coming to the point that you're advocating for, which was to appreciate that the world is benevolent and whatever is happening to me is happening for a higher reason. And as you pointed out so aptly, thank you for bringing it up, it's when something good happens, what we think is good, somebody may just say, it's because I'm so smart. And when it goes bad, then say, why do bad things happen to good people? Or even as a devotee, we may have a hard time when bad things happen to say, okay, this is also helpful. That's harder. So Krishna says in the Gita that there's three ways in which, or three psychological conditions that he wants to help us overcome. And the first one is raga. Raga means attachment to everything that has a shelf life. This is something he mentions in the Gita in several places. He says, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate Buddha. Buddha means a smart person. Doesn't get really attached to things that have a beginning and an end. They have a shelf life. Because he said, we're permanent, we're what remains, and that part's going away. So it's more important what we are than what we have. And he said, learn to get over that. There are ways to do that, but we can talk about that another time. And then the next one is bhaya. Bhaya means fear of the idea that I actually exist. We can get so disappointed with the way the world goes that we think that it would be better to not exist. Therefore, there are philosophies of existentialism that opine that we're crying into a void. There is no response from the universe. This is the idea of some writers like Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. The whole idea behind it is there is nobody listening to you. You're just crying into a void. And then there are various philosophies that say perfection of life, or there is no perfection of life because you don't really exist. The ultimate end of your practice is to realize that you're a non-entity. You're anatma. You're not an atma, you're anatma. It means you don't have a personal existence. And Prabhupada gives a simple analogy for this. If you're very ill and in a critical condition and life's so painful, eating's painful, your eyes hurt, hearing things is painful, digesting's painful, you may think, well, just let me die because everything's so painful. But what Krishna's saying is, don't die. First of all, you can't. And second of all, better to get healthy, because there is a healthy way and an enjoyable way when we eat, when we hear, when we feel, then we actually enjoy life. So there's, for us as spiritual beings, there's a healthy life. And you can experience that. So get over the fear of being an individual person. We've suffered so much that we wanted to stop. So we don't know the alternative. So he said, get over that. And krodha. Krodha means anger. Due to being assaulted by so many differing opinions about what the goal of life is and how to attain it. He said, we become so confused that we become angry. You can say, well, they can't all be right because you're saying different things, and therefore nobody's right. Or atheism, for instance, doesn't make sense because logically it doesn't make sense. Because if you say you're an atheist and you say there is no God, you must be God to say that. Because in order to know there's no God, you'd have to be omniscient to be able to say there is no God. So honestly, you could say you're agnostic. Like that means literally, I just don't know. And so Krishna says there is a way to overcome that also. So those who are resistant to the idea that whatever is happening to me is happening for a reason can overcome that by hearing Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita solves these psychological anomalies and gives us context. We need context in order to understand why I'm suffering. Because if you don't have context, it's practically impossible to understand why something seemingly random is coming to me randomly and happening, a reversal of force. But I've been good my whole life. I brushed my teeth. I even flossed. And whatever everybody told me, I did it. And then why this? So you need the context that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, that we're on a continuum, etc. Thank you for the point. Okay, yes?
Just a quick reflection. First of all, thank you so much for such an amazing class. And the line that you said, Krishna is responsive.
Yes.
So a quick reflection, like it's a very satiating thought, very relieving, especially for me. And I would say a very inspiring feeling to ponder upon throughout Kartik fast.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I love it too. Is really, if consider that one point. We don't have to know everything, but if we know one thing, and that is that Krishna is responsive, then leave it to Krishna. Just express yourself. You can even tell Krishna how you're suffering. Prabhupada writes in one place that you can pray to Krishna and tell Krishna, I'm suffering like anything. And he says, Prabhupada said, I'm being tossed in the ocean of the material world this way and that, just like this. So it feels so good just to say, even if you don't know who God is, say, God, please help me. Whoever you are, wherever you are, please help me. This is a human expression. Beavers don't do it. They just chew up your furniture. But humans can go like this and say, God, please reveal yourself. God, please help me. That's Gajendra. You know, he didn't know. He just knew he had a crocodile on his leg. And he wanted to get free. And he just started praying. At first, he wasn't even aware he was praying to. But it was so sincere and so urgent that God responded. That's one of the main lessons of the Bhagavatam. God always responds. He's responding now. It's just that I'm ignoring him. How do you respond to people who ignore you? It's a good question. How do you feel when people ignore you? Have you ever been ignored? I've been ignored. I had this experience in San Francisco once. I was distributing books around Market and Powell Street. It's a downtown area. And I approached this person and he walked by me as if I wasn't there. It wasn't that he said, get out of here, go get a job, like I've heard people say when I was younger and distributing books. He just, as if I didn't exist. And I felt the pall of darkness fall over me at that point. Ignorance causes darkness. It means ignorance. You're looking away from the light. Every living being is a light. That's why we say namaste. I honor the light within all others, and the way yoga teachers say it nowadays. And the fact is that when we ignore that there's a living soul within the body, and that there's a supreme living soul within every body, then we go into a state of darkness. The opposite of love is not hate, but it's indifference. And so there's a way in which when we ignore God, and then we're ignoring ourselves because we're part of God. And therefore we feel darkness in our life. So the simple process of Krishna consciousness is just turn your attention back to Krishna. That's it. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'm Namini. I came in a little late. So
May we give you the mic?
Yep.
Would you like to use that?
I came in a little late.
Just hold it right next to your...
The earlier part of your session. But
Yeah.
okay, I have a question which is slightly off topic. So I've been coming to the sessions, have been associated with ISKCON for like more than 4-5 years now. But I still find it really hard to, follow a lot of the practices. I'm not able to do the basic ones also. One question that keeps propping up again and again is, why should I trust ISKCON, or why should I follow Swami Prabhupada's books, or anybody else any gurus associated with ISKCON and not others? Because there's just a general level of skepticism, and we're like, why would we believe in this version of the Bhagavad Gita, or what makes it authentic? That question kind of starts and tends to end the your association with it. So at least for me. So how does one come across or grow out of that and stick, maybe find a way to stick more to ISKCON, or for that matter any Krishna basically?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for such an important question. Well, I can tell about my own personal experience. When I was a kid, actually in kindergarten and first grade, I had this question I kept asking my parents, which was, why do I have to die? And I wanted to know the answer, but they didn't know the answer to that. And it was something that I thought about a lot. And when I became a teenager, I looked into it more, because there are a lot of decisions to make as a teenager. For instance, are you going to go on to college? Are you going to get a job? And at that point I was thinking, what's the point? If I can't answer this one question, then why should I exert myself so much for these other things? It seemed that I should be able to answer that particular question. And what I found on my journey was that the more I sincerely asked the question of how to find this answer, and also what I was just saying, God, please help me. Whatever institution, whatever, it's a personal journey. And when we make a sincere inquiry, and Prabhupada writes about this in one of his purports, he said, when we have sincere earnestness to know, then that's when there's this almost magical unfoldment in our life of help that we get. An intelligence. Krishna says in the Gita, I mentioned this earlier, he says that if you sincerely inquire and you want to know me, then I'll light your path for you. So my suggestion is focus on just your own sincere question. And, find for yourself that, identify your sincerity. In fact, when I chant japa, have you ever chanted japa? It's part of one of the things you're talking. So when I find where I get the most traction in chanting japa is when I try to find my sincerity. I try to align it before I start chanting, and while I'm chanting, I try to find my sincerity. What sincerity means to me is, Krishna, I really want to know you. I really want to know you. I really want to know you. And if I can find that amidst the junk piles of everything else that's going on in my mind and heart, and I can find that one element that, Krishna, I sincerely want to know you, and then I chant like that, then I feel so connected and satisfied immediately. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that when you're sincere, it's ironclad. And nobody can lead you astray if you're sincere. The only way I get led astray is if I actually want something else. It comes from me. And then someone says, well, how about this over here? It's like, yeah, maybe that's okay too. Maybe there is a way to get, like in the financial world, people all the time offer, like, you want a deal? I'll tell you what, very little down payment and you're going to get 10 times back. A book I read years ago about finance it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. They said one of the main principles of investment is look out for get-rich-quick schemes, because there is none. There are no viable get-rich-quick. And in spiritual practice, there is no get-rich-quick process, or it has to come from our own sincerity. So start with that foundation. Spend time looking within and saying, I really want you, Krishna. And when you pray from that position, then it becomes more clear what to take, what not to take. After all, you go into any institution and you got people. Where there's people, there's problems. And you have all kinds of people together. Institutions are necessary because working together and having association, we have to have that. But does it mean that it's perfect? Absolutely not. So you have to be perfect, and the only way to be perfect is to be sincere. And if you're sincere and you do that, you'll find within whatever process you're pursuing, or within whatever institution you decide to connect with, you'll find your niche, because Krishna will say, here's your person. It has to come from us. Right? Does that help?
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Scanning the audience. Reflection? Question? Yes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I have a question.
How come that's not so loud? Is it?
You just have to keep it really close to your
She's got it right close to her mouth. Go ahead.
So, when you said Krishna is responsive responsive in general. So, how do we understand Srimad? There are instances where in Srimad Bhagavatam where probably he is not responsive. For example, during Ras Leela, when he disappeared, or when Krishna, gopis came to meet him, and he just vanished from the scene. So how do you understand?
Well, why do you think he did that?
To increase the
Yeah, go ahead. You're saying it.
to increase the nectar and to increase.
That's pretty responsive. Yeah. Thing is, amanit vamadambit vam. I talked about in the beginning from the Bhagavad Gita how Krishna says you have to prepare the field, prepare yourself. And one of the ways that I interact with the world is I want to control it. And I bring that idea when I approach Krishna. And I want to control Krishna. And I want the answer I want. If it's not the answer, and if it's not in the time that I want, then oh well, he didn't fulfill my desire, so forget it. So, of course, you answered your own question, but there is a way in which we may in our lives expect a certain answer at a certain time. But the approach is to be open and submissive to the answer when it comes. That's part of being patient. It's one of the points that Rupa Goswami makes in his book, The Nectar of Instruction. He says, part of spiritual life is being very patient. So, there may appear times in our lives when our prayers aren't answered. And then we realize later, oh, I'm such a fool. I didn't see it. Or he was waiting for the perfect time to answer the question. But they're always answered. Because Krishna's 100% responsive. He doesn't miss anything. This is one thing that Gajendra says after he prays and Krishna comes and he offers his prayers. He said, Krishna, you're never lazy. He uses this word, alaya. He says, you're never lazy. You're always there. You're there for me even before I pray. Totally attentive to everything. And then it appears when I pray, and sometimes it doesn't come, the answer doesn't come the way I wanted it to come, because he has a perfect way of answering it for our highest good. And this is a premise. It is part of the fear idea we have that maybe God doesn't like me, or he doesn't understand me, or something like that. And in the Gita, one of the visceral ways you can overcome that feeling, and this goes back to your question also, Bhagavad Gita is Krishna's words. And when you read Krishna's words yourself directly, you'll find that they're self-luminous. This is one of the ways in which, for instance, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, just hearing Lord Chaitanya speak to him, he said, oh my God, you're God. Because it wasn't an intellectualization of the process. He's like, you know what I'm thinking. You're speaking in such a way, I can't deny you're God. And I know I had that experience when I read Bhagavad Gita. After all my inquiry, all my searches and all my prayers, who are you? Please reveal yourself. How is it? How do I find you? And I read Bhagavad Gita and he said, here I am, speaking right to you. And I felt so satisfied by that, because that's one of the mediums through which he speaks to us very directly. So it's a real relationship. It's a real relationship. It's not a philosophized process. It's not theoretical. It's direct. And you have to have that direct experience. Krishna says in the 9th chapter of the Gita, Pratyakshavāgamam dharmyam. The perfection of this process is when you feel it yourself directly. Thank you for your question, which I know was to open up the conversation more. We'll take maybe 2 more, and then we'll have, if we have time, a little kirtan. Yes, Radhisham, you'll just say, do whatever you want. I better ask. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, as your first question was out of 4 questions, what is my purpose? And then you said, put down your priority list and then you can reach out there. So, I just want to understand around the purpose piece in terms of, is it as per the 18th chapter of Gita which says complete surrender to Krishna, or it is about going back to your home, like my home, from where I have come, not me as a body, but me as a soul. So what is the actual purpose?
Can you notice that he's already working on his priority list?
Yeah.
I told you that if you start thinking about it, you're really going to get into it, and you're already thinking about it. So you're asking this question, should it be Sarva Dharma Parityaja, or what was the other one?
Is it complete surrender or
Or-
it's going back?
Complete surrender, or what was the second option you had?
Where I've come from. My soul is the
Where do I come from? What should I be? And this is really something everyone should do for him or herself, is take time to prioritize. I know at first I put on the top of my list what I knew I had to put. This is in the Bhagavatam, Ante Narayana Smriti. As Parikshit Maharaj asked this question to Shukadev, he said, What's the ultimate purpose of my life? He said, Ante Narayana Smriti. At the end of life, you should be able to remember God. So I put that at the top. And then I thought, well, maybe it should be love of God at the top, and something like that. It's all good. But the point is, thinking about it and prioritizing it, you know that you're doing things intentionally when you decide for yourself. There's a writer, his name is Guy Kawasaki. He was one of the founders of the Apple Corporation. He wrote a bunch of books. One of them I read was, huh? No, that's a different guy. Guy Kawasaki's different. He wrote the book called Art of the Start, and other books too. That's another guy, Rich Dad Poor Dad. And so in it, he made this point that I appreciated. It said, frame or be framed. Means frame what you want your life to be. You decide what your purpose is. And think it through. What are your priorities? You're responsible. That's one of the main ideas behind purpose. Beavers don't have a purpose. It's to build, they do. It's to build dams. But human beings, I know it's a lot of responsibility. But that's what the Shastra says. You're a human. You're not a beaver. So you get to decide. You have to decide if you want the ultimate thing, and you should ask for it, but decide on it yourself. And there's nothing more valuable than you deciding and writing it down yourself. So consult Bhagavad Gita. And if you write Sarvadharma and Purityaja on the top of your priority list, how is that going to change the way you organize your life? That's a real question. If I put at the very top of my list, the main purpose of my life is to surrender to God, would it change anything you're doing right now? Don't be afraid to say yes. We won't go. It would change. And so that's why the question is there. What's my purpose? You keep asking that because there's so many confusing and conflicting situations in this life. You have to know what your purpose is. And if you ask, what's my purpose? You put it at the very top, and it gives you internal fortitude to deal with all the problems of life because you already know this is my purpose. I just took an ethics class. It was free at the Temple President's meeting. I went to a New Vrindavan, and Gopal Hardy, he's a professor of ethics, and he presented all these ethical questions that they teach in a class on ethics. And it just makes one realize that being a human being comes with a lot of responsibility. That's why some people abdicate their responsibility and they give it to others. I don't want to think about it. I'll just give it to a politician. Let them tell me how to do it. Or let somebody else dictate my life. Or let my senses just dictate. Or let me numb my senses through intoxication so I don't have to decide anything. Spiritual life means, no, I'm going to become purposeful. I'm going to decide for myself, and I'll get the best information possible. You have to have a source of information that you trust. That's important, because otherwise you get infinite regress in your life. He said, prove that water boils at 200 degrees. Here's a thermometer, 200 degrees, boil. Prove the thermometer. Got a thermometer testing kit, what that is. And they test it, and it's like, it's a real thermometer. Prove that's a real thermometer testing kit. At some point, you have to stand and not retreat, and you have to say, this is axiomatic truth. Even in every class you've ever taken in academics, you had to accept an axiomatic truth decided upon by people who already did the experiment previously, right? So once you have that, and based on that, you decide what your purpose in life is, you can start moving towards it. Because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. It's from Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Yes, last question, and I'll answer it quickly.
Yeah, the reflection first. The reflection.
Reflection first.
So last time when you were here, you discussed
chapter 6, verse 38, 39, where, I mean, that.
What a memory he has. I didn't even remember giving a class on that. Go ahead.
From that class, you mentioned that whatever small steps we will take, it will remain in your spiritual life. I mean, whatever you will take, it will go along. So that really helped me in the last 6-7 months in taking small steps. And then now the question with respect to today's class would be, you suggested that Krishna is responsive. So Krishna is responsive towards your soul, or like being, currently I have taken birth as a material body, so is Krishna responsive to your family, to your surroundings also? Like, is it only that he will bless me, or, I mean, if I walk on this path, or it will have some effect over my family also, whatever steps I take?
Oh yeah, everything that we do has an effect on our environment. You can test it out. But Krishna, as Prahlad Maharaj says in one of his prayers, Krishna, you're everything. All the energies that I see in my life, my family, my boss, the check I get from my boss, that's all you. It's all your energy. And Parasya Shaktir Vivadaiva Shriyate Swabhavika Jnana Bala Kriya Cha. He has all these immense energies all working together. And when we embrace Krishna consciousness, when we embrace Krishna, the root of everything, then everything else is also affected in our life. It's like watering the root of a tree. When you water the root, then all the other branches and leaves are naturally nourished. So, for instance, if you're in a family and you become responsible spiritually, your kids will notice it. All your relatives will notice it. They'll notice when your priorities change. Let's go to the, what? What does your cousin want you to go do? Bollywood. And he's like, I would, but I'm going to the Janmashtami program tonight, or something like that. Does that have an effect on your cousin? Yeah. I saw it in my family. My family was not Krishna conscious growing up. And because I became a devotee, and I lived both my mother and father are gone, but they both came to appreciate. I mean, they didn't appreciate it when I left home and joined the Brahmacharya ashram. But in their lifetime, by the end, my mother took initiation. And that was the last thing I ever expected to happen. It was one of the most affirming aspects of Krishna consciousness, that I knew that I wanted to be a devotee more than anything else. And that's what I did. And I didn't know, especially in the beginning, how it would affect my parents. But my mother took initiation before she passed away. How did that happen? Krishna's arrangement. Krishna makes arrangements in amazing ways. And we don't know how he's going to do it, but we just know he will. Another thing, in our services, I come from a temple on the west coast of America. It's kind of Silicon Valley. We have a tight-knit community there. And one of the things we do is we consistently set goals for our services. One of the services that we do there is to distribute books. And since around 1996, we started a process of setting challenging goals for us to meet every month, every year. And in the process, every time we do it, we think, how's this going to happen? And then when it happens, we think, we could never do it again, but we try to do it again. And every time we do it again, we think, well, it wasn't us. The resources and the wherewithal to do it comes from somehow Krishna's providing, and it just keeps happening. And living in that zone where you're depending on Krishna and seeing how he's reciprocating in ways that you couldn't have imagined, this is highly affirming. So it's good to take some risks, gamble your life. In fact, Prabhupada once said, there's these 4 regulative principles. One of them is gambling. Only 5% of the population is highly susceptible to compulsive gambling. I read that in Las Vegas once. And But, this idea to gamble, Prabhupada said it's fulfilled in Krishna consciousness. Because if you surrender to Krishna, that seems like a big gamble. Like, I was going to try to order my life in my way, but I'm going to give it to Krishna. I'm going to do it your way. So it's like a gamble, because you're saying, like, Krishna, I'm just going to surrender to you. You do whatever you want with me. That's Sarvadharma Parityajya, right? You do whatever you want. I'm surrendering to you. I'm yours. And then, okay, gamble. You get the same exhilaration, right? Okay, I'm putting my house on red, and spin the roulette wheel. And then I'm putting my whole life on Krishna. How's that going to turn out? It'll turn out great. Better than you could have imagined. And if you don't, no matter what you do, it's going to turn on its head. And the best laid plans, they always fail in the material world. Every living entity's tried. You put it on a game show, living entity over here. What is it? 10 trillion to the 10 trillionth power. They've tried to get something in the material world. What is their score so far? 0. On the other side, everybody who surrenders to Krishna even a little bit, they always win. So, in surrendering to Krishna, there's all gain and no loss. In the material world, it's all loss and no gain. Guaranteed. And last thing I'll say, I was just as I mentioned, in New Vrindavan. That's a big community that Prabhupada oversaw a long time ago. And it's a replica of Vrindavan. And it's in Pittsburgh at the airport. The devotees were telling me they're always doing construction on the roadways and it's very inconvenient. So they put a sign up, the government, that said, temporary inconvenience for permanent benefit. And then because people were so annoyed with all the dust and construction and traffic jams, somebody switched the sign and it said, permanent inconvenience, temporary benefit. So Krishna consciousness is permanent benefit, temporary inconvenience. Material world, permanent inconvenience, temporary benefit. That's how that works.